Story 1. The glass coffin of Suginami Kenji moved into the apartment on the third floor of the Suginami complex primarily because of the price. It was impossibly cheap for Tokyo, a relic from the Showa era with thin walls and the perpetually damp smell of old wood and forgotten meals. It was almost perfect, save for one thing: the mirror. The contract had stated the apartment would be completely empty, but the mirror stood against the far wall of the main room, a towering, floor-to-ceiling slab of tarnished glass framed in dark, heavy cedar. It had an unsettling presence, too large and ornate for the small space. The previous tenant, they insisted it stay, the landlord had whispered, scratching his neck. It's bolted. You'd need tools and a helper. I'll knock a few thousand yen off the first month, yes. Kenji, desperate for the deal, agreed. He quickly learned to live with the mirror, a silent, reflective giant that dominated his small life. For the first few weeks, it was just a mirror. It showed Kenji rushing to work, his dark suit crisp against the faded wallpaper. It showed his lonely dinners of instant ramen. It showed the unmade futon and the single, buzzing fluorescent light above. Then, the glitches started. It began subtly, like a flaw in the glass. One night, while brushing his teeth, Kenji glanced at his reflection. Behind him, reflected in the dusty room, was a faint, blurry shape, a curtain of long, black hair. Kenji spun around, his heart pounding against his ribs. The room was empty. The window was shut. He looked back at the mirror. His own reflection stared back, the space behind him clear. He attributed it to fatigue. He'd been working late, the train ride was long, and the fluorescent bulb was flickering. But the phantom image returned. It happened almost every night at exactly 2:17 a.m. Kenji would wake, compelled to look at the glass. And there, reflected in the dim light, was the face. It wasn't Kenji's reflection, and it wasn't a shadow. It was a woman, barely discernible, standing just behind his right shoulder. Her skin was a pallid, underwater white, and her eyes were two black, cavernous pools that seemed to drink the light. Her hair was everywhere, thick and dripping, obscuring her body like seaweed caught in a dark current. The terror wasn't in seeing her, but in the dreadful realization that she was only in the glass. Kenji tried everything. He burned incense, the sweet, cloying smoke failing to mask the persistent metallic scent that seemed to cling to the mirror's surface. He asked a neighbor if they knew about the previous tenant. The mirror. The old woman downstairs rasped, clutching her shawl. The girl who lived here, she spent all her time looking into it. She said she could see her mother in it. Then, one rainy night, she just dissolved. Left nothing but the glass. Kenji stopped sleeping. He couldn't move the mirror. It felt rooted to the floor, heavier than iron. He couldn't cover it. Every blanket, towel, or newspaper he draped over it would slide to the floor by morning, as if gently peeled away by an unseen hand. He decided to communicate. He stood before the mirror, feeling the cold radiating from the glass even across the room, and spoke into the silence. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice shaking. The reflection of the room remained still. The woman was not present. Kenji slumped onto his futon. Then, he heard a sound. A quiet, dry tapping, like a fingernail gently scraping across glass. He looked up. In the mirror, the woman was staring at him. Her face was clear now, horribly defined, the skin stretched tight over a skull that seemed too small for her unnatural smile. Her lips didn't move, but the tapping continued. Tap. 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 In the reflection of his small desk, a book, a paperback of Murakami, rose slowly into the air and then dropped. Thud. Kenji looked at the real desk. The book was untouched, lying flat. He looked back at the mirror. The woman's smile widened, revealing teeth that were too long, too pointed. Her entire reflection was shimmering, a ripple passing through the glass as if it were water. Kenji scrambled backward until his back hit the cold wall. He watched in paralyzing horror as the reflected woman raised a hand. It was pale and skeletal, tipped with nails the color of dried blood. Slowly, impossibly, the reflected hand pressed against the glass. The room remained at a standstill. The fluorescent light buzzed. Then, a low, wet sound, the sound of something being peeled from a slick surface, filled the air. In the mirror, the woman's reflection was leaning forward, her face distorted as she pressed against the boundary. And then, her hand, the real, physical hand, pushed through the surface of the glass. It was not shattering. The glass did not break. The hand simply emerged, trailing a shimmering, viscous substance that looked like liquid shadow. It was deathly cold, and the air around it instantly froze. Kenji screamed, a choked, useless sound. The woman's reflection kept her eyes locked on his, but the rest of her was moving, sliding out of the glass. Her torso, elongated and slick, was halfway into the room. Her body was a dark, twisting shadow, but her hair, saturated with what looked like pond water, slapped wetly onto the dusty floor. She was exiting her glass coffin. Kenji knew he could not outrun it. He had nowhere to go. She was already in his space, and her face, now inches from his, was the face of pure, ancient vengeance. He squeezed his eyes shut, begging for the nightmare to end, but the smell of stagnant water and cold iron was suffocating. He heard the final, dreadful sound, the sound of bare feet hitting the wooden floor. She was out. When the police finally came, alerted by the neighbors who complained about the terrible smell and the strange, high-pitched scratching sound that continued for days, they found Kenji curled in the corner, his eyes wide open, staring blankly at the wall. The large, oppressive cedar-framed mirror was gone. The police searched the apartment thoroughly, checking the closet, the balcony, even the crawl spaces. The mirror, which the landlord confirmed was bolted into the frame, had vanished without a trace. Kenji was taken to the hospital, completely catatonic. He never spoke again, never reacted to light or sound. He only moved his eyes. They always tracked to the same direction, any reflective surface. The screen of a turned-off cell phone, the highly polished floor, the stainless steel of a tray. The last officer to leave the apartment noticed something unusual. In the middle of the empty wall where the mirror once stood, there was a single, tiny, almost invisible shard of glass, no bigger than a grain of rice, embedded halfway into the old wallpaper. He reached out to touch it, intending to report it as evidence. As his finger drew near, he caught his own reflection in the tiny fragment. And behind him, reflected only in the grain of glass, was a faint, grinning face, wrapped in long, wet black hair. Story 2. Hiroki's professional mandate was simple. Survey the property, assess the structural integrity, and sign off on the demolition order. He was an architect specializing in modernization, a man of steel and glass, and he despised the assignment. A crumbling, isolated village named Kifun, buried deep in the cedar-choked mountains of the Nagano prefecture. The air in Kifun was perpetually damp, thick with the scent of pine and something else, something mineral and cold, like wet clay mixed with old copper. There were no cell signals. The few remaining villagers were aged, their faces creased by generations of stoicism, and they moved with a silent, measured pace that made Hiroki feel like an intruder in a ritual. The object of his survey was the oldest house in the village, The Nakamura House, slated to be replaced by a modern, if ill-advised, solar farming hub. The house sat unnervingly close to the village's dominant feature, the Anki, or the Great Anchor Tree. The Anki was a cryptomeria cedar of impossible size and girth, its trunk wider than a small car, its branches filtering the already dim sunlight into perpetual twilight. Its roots, thick as pythons, snaked across the ground, rising and falling like the ribcage of a buried giant. "Do not disturb the roots, young man," the village elder, a frail woman named Shizuko, warned him on his first day. Her voice was thin but carried the weight of stone. "The Nakamura house has always stood with the roots. It is the vessel for the Okorizome." "The root washing?" Hiroki asked, translating the kanji mentally. "It is what keeps us prosperous," she said, her eyes, the color of old mud, flickering towards the tree. "It keeps the ground solid, and the crops clean. We feed the roots, and the roots return the favor. That house is where the chosen waits." Hiroki, a man of engineering, dismissed it as harmless local folklore, a way to prevent him from digging. The Nakamura house was a nightmare of non-Euclidean geometry. It felt like it had grown around the Anki's roots rather than been built alongside them. The beams were bowed, the walls slanted, and the floors creaked not just with age, but with a strange, rhythmic settling sound, like a large, slow breath. The basement was the worst. It wasn't a true basement, but a dirt-floored crawlspace. The air down there was stifling, and the smell was stronger, metallic, sweet, and faintly organic, like decaying meat marinated in iron filings. Hiroki set up his tripod and his ground-penetrating radar. His goal was to find the foundation, but the radar data was baffling. It showed dense, solid material below the dirt floor, but the material was non-uniform. It wasn't concrete or rock. The density varied wildly, suggesting a spongy, porous structure shot through with incredibly hard, calcified elements. Working by the single, weak lamp he'd brought, Hiroki noticed the strange patterns in the earth. The dirt was unnaturally dry in places, and in others, slick with a glistening, colorless residue. He was examining a section of the stone foundation when he saw it. Embedded in the cold, wet stone, fastened with rust-colored rivets, was a thick, antique iron clamp, a device resembling a large, heavy surgical vise. It was fixed to the stone, and the other end was firmly pressed against a thick, fleshy white protrusion that had grown into the wall. It looked exactly like a root. But the texture was wrong. It was smooth, taut, and strangely warm to the touch. It didn't have the rough, bark-like exterior of the cedar root. It looked dermatological. Hiroki recoiled, his professional detachment crumbling into primal dread. He needed a closer look. He pulled his small trowel from his kit and began scraping the earth away from the wall beneath the clamp. The dirt gave way easily. And then, he found the lattice. It wasn't a chaotic network of roots. It was a woven, deliberate structure. Dozens of these smooth, pale, serpentine structures crossed and intertwined beneath the house, forming a perfect grid. They were moving, or seemed to be. A subtle, slow pulse traveled beneath their unnaturally pale surface. He scraped away more dirt, following one of the structures that vanished into the floor near the center of the room. The trowel hit something hard, a round, polished object, far too smooth to be a stone. He dug it out, shivering in the cold damp air. It was a small, perfectly preserved wooden box, crafted from the Anki's cedar, tied shut with a length of human hair, black and very long. Ignoring the intense fear coiling in his stomach, Hiroki tore the hair free and opened the box. Inside was a small, leather-bound journal, its pages brittle with age and moisture. It was the diary of Nakamura Haruo, the last resident of the house, dated 50 years prior. Hiroki sat back on the dirt, the weak lamplight illuminating the spidery script. August 14th, Showa 47. They chose me. I am the chosen of this cycle. I saw the mark on my rice bowl, the smudge of the red ochre. I am meant for the roots. Shizuko-sama tells me it is an honor. It is the only way the village survives. But when I look at the Anki now, I don't see a sacred tree. I see a jaw waiting to close. August 17th. My body has begun to change. It is the slow feed. The elders bring me the special spring water. Not water, but a thick, milky sap. It tastes like metal and silence. My skin feels tight, stretched. I look at my hand, and the veins are too prominent, too blue. They are the same color as the things growing in the basement. They say the Anki needs calcium and iron. It is not fed by the soil, but by the spine. August 20th. They brought me down here today. Into the pit beneath the house. The pit is where the roots are hungry. I saw the previous chosen. He is no longer a man. He is a wall. His skeleton, calcified by the sap, forms the foundation. His limbs are the white, pulsing roots that hold up the main beam. His eyes are gone, but his skull is still there, holding up the east corner. He is solid, eternal, and Kifun prospers because he cannot move. They explained the Okorizome. It is not about washing the roots. It is about becoming the roots. August 21st. Saint, the iron clamps are ready. They will bind my torso and my pelvis, securing me to the stone. I will be submerged in the wet clay, and the sap will do the rest. My skin will harden, my bones will fuse, and the white, hungry veins will snake out and grasp the beams. I will be the living architecture of Kifun. I will hear the rain fall for 1,000 years, and I will be silent. This is the honor. This is the great service. They said the last thing that leaves the body is the consciousness. I will still be here. I will be supporting the roof. I will be the floor. I will be beneath the feet of the next chosen. When they walk, I will feel the weight. 4 a.m., August 22nd. The time is near. I feel the sap working. I can't move my legs. I can't speak. I am already becoming wood. They are coming for me now. If anyone finds this, you must burn the Anki. You must cut the roots. The prosperity is a lie. The tree is not sacred. It is a slow, living coffin. I hear the elders' footsteps above. I am waiting. I am the root. I am. The writing stopped abruptly. The rest of the pages were blank, except for a reddish-brown stain that soaked the final page, smelling faintly of the same sweet, metallic scent in the air. Hiroki dropped the journal. The cold silence of the basement pressed in on him. He realized what his radar had detected. A structural foundation made not of masonry, but of calcified human remains, organized and sustained by a biological substance that the villagers lovingly called roots. The entire Nakamura house was a monument built on the silent, agonizing sacrifice of generations. He looked at the iron clamp again, and at the smooth, pale root-like structure it held. He understood the purpose of the vice. It wasn't to anchor the root, but to secure the body until the transformation was complete. It was a life support system and a restraint. He stood up, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He had to get out. He had to expose this. He had to burn the damn tree. He scrambled up the narrow basement stairs, throwing his equipment aside. He burst into the main room. The sudden silence was deafening. The perpetual creaking of the house had stopped. He ran to the front door, throwing open the shoji screen. Outside, the village was quiet, draped in the mist that never seemed to lift. But standing between him and the narrow, winding mountain path were 5 figures. Shizuko and 4 other elders, all silent, all watching. They wore simple, dark kimonos and held no weapons, but their collective gaze was the heaviest thing Hiroki had ever felt. "The survey is complete, young man?" Shizuko asked, her voice calm, almost soothing. You are keeping people alive down there," Hiroki stammered, pointing frantically back at the house. "You are cementing them into the foundation. Not keeping them alive," another elder, a man with vacant eyes, corrected softly. "We are making them permanent. The root system of the Anki must be constantly renewed. The old structures decay. We must supply the new scaffold." Shizuko stepped closer, her expression unchanging. "You came here to assess the structural integrity, Hiroki-san. Now you understand. The Nakamura house is the most structurally sound building in Kifune. It is built upon dedication, upon sacrifice, and upon the most enduring frame known to man." "You are insane," Hiroki choked out. He took a step to run, but 2 of the elders moved with surprising speed, blocking his path. "No," Shizuko said, taking his arm with a grip that felt impossibly strong. Her cold fingers wrapped around his wrist. "We are pragmatic. The city demands its modern construction. The Anki demands its ancient foundation. You are an architect, Hiroki-san. You understand materials. You understand the necessity of a strong base." She began to lead him, gently but inexorably, not towards the village path, but towards the back of the Nakamura house, where the monstrous trunk of the Anki loomed, its shadows swallowing the light. The back wall of the house was not wood. It was a rough, resinous plaster that had been built up over centuries. At its base, where it met the colossal trunk of the Anki, there was a seam, a break in the plaster, hidden by overgrown ferns. One of the elders pressed a spot on the wall, and a section of the plaster, about the size of a door, swung silently inward, revealing a dark, earthen tunnel that led directly into the base of the great anchor tree. The smell that poured out was overwhelmingly organic, a mixture of wet wood, hot compost, and that sickly sweet metallic scent. "The Nakamura house is the waiting room," Shizuko explained, her breath cool against his ear. "But the Anki is the temple. The roots are waiting for new scaffolding, new materials." Hiroki struggled, but the elders held him fast. They were wiry, strong, and moved with a coordinated, almost mechanical efficiency. "You read Haruo's journal," Shizuko said, a faint, proud smile touching her lips. "He found honor in his service. He is what holds up the West Beam now. You, too, will find your purpose, Hiroki-san. You came here to replace a dwelling. Now, you are the framework." They dragged him down the tunnel. It was low and narrow, forcing him to crawl. The ground was not dirt, but a soft, springy layer of white, fungal growth. The air was warm, humid, and full of the constant, low thrumming, the sound of the tree's life, and the silent suffering of its many inhabitants. The tunnel opened into a vast, natural chamber, located directly beneath the colossal core of the Anki. It was horrifyingly beautiful. The central column was not wood, but a shimmering, brown, organic material, weeping a thick, clear sap that pooled on the ground. Radiating outwards from the core was an impossible network of structures, forming a perfect, interlocking dome. These were the roots. They were thick, pale, vein-shot columns, some smooth and taut like those in the basement, others calcified and rigid, clearly forming load-bearing pillars. In the heart of several of the older, thicker pillars, Hiroki could see the faint, horrifying outline of human bones, pelvic girdles, spinal columns, and fused skulls, perfectly integrated into the organic architecture. He was looking at a cathedral built entirely of people. In the center of the chamber, beneath a drip of the shimmering sap, was a depression in the earth, already lined with fresh, wet clay. Above it, fixed to the organic ceiling, was a hanging mechanism, and below it, an arrangement of the heavy, iron clamps. The Chosen's final cradle. You understand now why the price of the property was so low, Shizuko murmured, pulling him toward the pit. The Anki selects those who draw too close to the roots. You came to replace a dwelling. Now, you will replace the framework. As the elders forced him into the pit, Hiroki looked up one last time at the ceiling of the chamber. He saw the network of living structures, the silent, agonizing sacrifice. He realized the Okori Zone was not a ceremony for one life, but a process of bioengineered construction, fueled by the consciousness of those entombed. He looked down at his own hands, which were already being covered in the sticky, metallic clay. The thick, milky sap dripped onto his face. The air, warm and heavy, pressed against his lungs. He felt a deep, chilling numbness start in his toes. He would be permanent. He would be silent. He would feel every raindrop that nourished the Anki, and every footstep that passed over his ossified remains. The final memory that crystallized in his mind, before the elders fixed the iron clamps across his chest and the sap began its terrible work, was the metallic, sweet taste of the sap on his tongue, and the sound of the ancient, slow breathing of the great anchor tree, which was now finally beginning to incorporate its newest, most stable support. He was no longer Hiroki, the architect. He was simply structure. And the prosperity of Kifun was secured, once more. Thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to subscribe, like, comment and turn on notifications if you enjoyed the video so you never miss an upload.